Is GameStop the next Microstrategy? We're talking the biggest of memes, meeting the biggest of companies. GameStop is buying billions in Bitcoin. Yes, you heard that right. We're going to talk about today on Bitcoin Season 2. Bitcoin Season 2 is brought to you by Arch Network, building bridgeless apps on Bitcoin. More on Arch later in the show. Let's kick it off. Colin, it's finally here.
The
black hole of all
has been fulfilled. A meme stock is converging on the meme financial strategy of not buying a meme coin, but certainly buying something that has one of the strongest mimetic energies of any asset in recent memory, Bitcoin.
We're going to create a meme black hole here with GameStop buying Bitcoin. Bitcoin's a black hole, but I think this has the potential to suck all the air out of whatever trend is hot. Like right now, everybody's talking about the Studio Ghibli edits on ChatGPT, but before you know it, those could take sideline to the GME and Bitcoin story, or they may not.
Or
who knows?
We converge. Studio Ghibli rendition of Michael Saylor and Ryan Cohen laughing on their yacht as they sucker hundreds of thousands of investors into buying their stocks, which may or may not be worth anything more than the financial engineering that they are engaging in. That's the kind of pessimist take. Going back to this has the potential to suck in all the, energy and attention on socials. I think people's reactions to this were pretty interesting, and we should actually talk about the news before we
before we get too far. What are the actual facts? Just before we get into it, we can talk about history. We can talk about reactions and takes. What's the facts?
So GameStop of meme stock fame, we'll be touching on that in a bit. If for those of you who may not remember, those who have short memories, in 2021, GameStop saw this explosive price action as a retail investor short squeeze led by a personality named Roaring Kitty, also known as Deep Effing Value on Reddit. Basically exploded the stock price up to like $1,000. I think the summer before it was trading for below like $50 or $20. And anyway, it captured headlines for many months because they basically blew up a bunch of hedge funds doing this. There's a whole congressional investigation and all this other stuff. That being said, GameStop is back in the news for a similarly clowny reason, and that is they are trying to adopt strategies, convert strategy, issuing convertible notes to buy Bitcoin. As this press release reads, GameStop announces proposed private offering of $1.3 billion of convertible senior notes. These convertible senior notes will have a maturity in 2030 and carry a 0% rate. And they're looking to raise about $1.3 million, and they're going to be using this according to the press release.
With a B, a billion.
Yeah, with a B, and they're going to be using this per the press release to potentially buy Bitcoin and also deploy the capital for the business of GameStop. Now, just zooming out or zooming in, doing something with the zoom. GameStop is a gaming company. They have stores all across the US, Europe, and Canada. They're a retail gaming store. And up until, I would say, probably, and you can see this in their financials, which we'll cover here in a second, up until probably like 2018 or 19, they were the dominant force in console gaming. Now that has really shifted as next-gen units or next-gen consoles like the PS5 and the Xbox One have moved towards online platforms for buying and selling games. Now, the majority of games, I would say, for most gamers, just using myself as a litmus test, are purchased through these virtual stores. People aren't going to GameStops as much anymore. So the uncharitable way to read this, as with the whole meme stock frenzy in 2021, is that GameStop is basically searching for an out to make itself relevant again, considering its core business is dying. Now, again, we'll cover financials in a second. I always kind of push back against the core business is dying part because I was like, that has to be a little bit overstated. There are still people who go and buy and sell and trade games through GameStop. They've tried to lean into collectibles and software as a way to shore up their hardware business line. But they are losing revenue year over year. And a lot of people are reading this as like a way for them to become relevant again. It's kind of a zombie company, but they can ape into Bitcoin and maybe ballast their suffering stock price. Going back to what I was saying earlier about this being interesting, capturing people's attention, you would have thought that this was Tesla or Apple doing a convert strategy to buy Bitcoin based on reactions on Twitter. I mean, people were parading this as like the coming flood of liquidity into publicly traded companies to buy Bitcoin. And they were acting the same way they did when Strategy started buying it, formerly Microstrategy, in 2020. I think that's kind of funny because, again, like, yeah, is it somewhat bullish that a quasi-dying company is deciding to buy Bitcoin? Maybe, maybe not. This is not as exciting to me as if you had like a Magnificent Seven company or a reputable Fortune 500 company deciding to leverage their leverage their balance sheet and their financial position to purchase Bitcoin. So I don't know. It's not that exciting to me. It's like, oh yay, another strategy. Does the market even want another strategy? I don't think people ask themselves these questions either. Eventually, investor appetite is going to die down for these high-levered Bitcoin proxy plays, I would imagine.
I mean, is there a second best MicroStrategy to borrow the term? Is there a second best? Because if MicroStrategy is the black hole of all equities, then one of these has to suck the other into its black hole.
Right. And maybe GameStop does catch up if they end up buying a bunch. I mean, 1.3 billion is nothing to shake a stick at. They've also got a lot. And
that's the thing. GameStop's sitting on a huge cash position. This is not really my specialty. I'm out of my depth talking about like equities and TradFi. You spend a little more time looking at this, but like, there's a reason it has this cash position, and it's not really because of like normal business activities. This is rooted in history because the arc of GameStop's story and why it's in the position it is because they were able to use the momentum of the 2021 phenomenon, the meme, the GameStop zeitgeist, if you will, to build this cash position. So I was sitting all this cash, and what are they going to do? It's funny because, back in 2021, there was, a Netflix documentary made about it too, but like, you had the Ken Griffin under Citadel come in and pretty much tamp down, they've been vilified for the full, as the entity, which like kind of neutered the GameStop short squeeze. But, we're coming up on almost a year now since Roaring Kitty, that figurehead of the GameStop zeitgeist, did reappear with a series of cryptic tweets rallying the masses. He talked about some of his theses about GameStop, and he took on a very large position, which he then revealed was his actually. And it kind of reignited the story. But then shortly after that, last summer, I think this almost is forgotten. The CEO of GameStop, Ryan Cohen, posted a photo, or maybe someone else posted a photo of him with Michael Saylor. This was like June of last year. I wish I could find the actual photo. So this kicked off a flurry of speculation. Like, oh my gosh, is GameStop doing this? Is GameStop doing that? As far as I'm aware, I don't think Saylor or anyone associated with MicroStrategy or GameStop really actually chimed in on this. But what's funny is at the time, if you looked at it, Ryan Cohen only followed 3 people on Twitter: Bitcoin Magazine, and GameStop. So you could clearly say like he's kind of calling his shots, or at least a direction about where he's going, and GameStop sitting on a giant cash position. Which brings us to today, where yesterday, we recorded this on Thursday afternoon. You'll be listening to this on Saturday morning. Yesterday on Twitter, on Wednesday, Michael Saylor posted or tweeted a photo, that same photo of him with Ryan Cohen, saying, welcome to Bitcoin, welcome to Team Bitcoin. And you have the two of them, obviously kind of like canned photo op from back in the day. And then you saw GameStop release the press release saying, we're going to issue convertible notes by $1.4 billion of Bitcoin. I don't know if that summarizes it today, Colin, and gives you something to jump off on, but
I think that does provide basically the background. We don't know how long Cohen's been talking with Saylor. I'm assuming he has, considering Saylor is the godfather of this strategy. And it's also TBD how much they will deploy into Bitcoin. I was about to say if they will. It seems kind of silly that they would.
They're socially obligated to by now.
Sort of, yeah. I mean, they're not necessarily socially obligated, but like if you're raising 1.3 billion and you have no other way to deploy that capital in a way that makes sense, right? They're not going to go out and buy a bunch of stores because no one's going to their stores anymore, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's a good jump off point to talk about some of the financials and then to touch on what you mentioned about their cash position and tie that back into the whole short squeeze story, because that is these two things are strangely linked almost in a cosmic coincidental kind of way. And maybe there are no such thing as coincidences. But the fact that the short squeeze is now potentially going to give birth to a second, strategy in the US, a second Microstrategy, if you will, I find to be just kind of delicious in a strange way. Because it's like, I don't know. It reminds me of the Assassin's Creed epithet, nothing is true, everything is permitted. But let's hop into some financials here. I'm not going to actually share my screen because then you would just be looking at a 10K from the SEC filing database that GameStop has made, and those are kind of boring to look at. So I'm just going to go ahead and rifle off some of the numbers here. GameStop had 3.8 billion revenue in 2024. Not bad, you might say, but dear listener, that is down from 5.3 billion in 2023. And if we go back even further, it gets worse. If we look at 2022, GameStop's net sales were 5.9 billion. In 2021, they were 6 billion. In 2020, the year of our Lord COVID, they were 5.1 billion. 2019, 6.5 billion. And this is when it gets really choppy. 2018, 8.3 billion. And 2017, 8.5 billion. So I only went as far back as 2017. I could go back farther and you might see even higher sales, probably, I would say, in the late tens, potentially, when GameStop was at its peak. But if we just look at the last 8 years, 8.5 billion in 2017 down to 3.8 in 2024, that's a pretty precipitous drop, right? I mean, they're basically having their revenue halved, or a little more than halved, over the course of 8 years. And that goes back into what I was saying earlier about the most uncharitable way to read this is that GameStop is sitting on this huge cash position as a result of its stock price action from the short squeeze in 2021. There's nothing there. You can't actually grow the core business with it because the core business, retail gaming, is on the out. And what are you going to do with it? Well, maybe you can supercharge your financial position by buying Bitcoin. That is the bull case for it, but also the bear case in a way.
Let me tell you about one of the most slept on opportunities in crypto. Arch is building fast, composable DeFi apps on Bitcoin. Arch apps tap into the OG blockchain with by far the most liquidity and best brand in crypto. I've known the team for over a year. The tech they're building is solid and they are racing towards mainnet. There's dexes like Saturn, meme coins on funkybit.fun, instant loans on Cha-Ching, and so much more. Plus, they're rewarding testnet users. So join me in trying out Arch while it's still early. Yeah, I mean, like this is a well-known trend we all know. This is Blockbuster heading into Netflix. This is the physical record stores and CDs heading into Apple Music. The distribution is going to be digital and it's not going to go back outside of a niche potential, enthusiast thing. But in the meantime, you've been blessed with the attention of a generation, the mimetic energy of that generation, and a giant cash position. So what do you do?
That's a really good point too about the attention economy here. It's like there's almost, we're investing on vibes nowadays. There's not any actual.
We're coding on vibes. We're gonna invest. I'm gonna vibe invest.
I mean, I do think there's something to be said that, I mean, if you watch like the Netflix biopic of this whole thing, I can't remember who do they get to do play Roaring Kitty. I can't remember.
I forget, but it was a great biopic. It was really
great.
fun. Yeah.
And if you watch that, it's like they really make this case, which if you go to the GameStop Reddit for this whole saga, this is true. You had a bunch of people with zero investing know-how, retail investors who hadn't invested in anything outside of their life, probably in their 401k, aping their life savings into GME during this whole craze. Basically, it turned into this kind of almost like activist protesting thing where it was like SU to Wall Street saying, you make all of this money in ways that are inaccessible to us. Now we are going to make money at your expense, right? Because the whole short selling thing is, and we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. Roaring Kitty kind of led it in response to immense shorting pressure from some of these big hedge funds, one of which was Citadel. Although I think Citadel just backstopped one of the other hedge funds that was hemorrhaging money.
And that's why I said Citadel, Ken Griffin became kind of like the boogeyman in that it's like there's always a bigger fish. You thought you were bankrupting fund one. Well, there's going to be the granddaddy of them all, Citadel. Citadel is kind of like, it's up there with BlackRock as far as like titans of finance and industry. So of course they're going to be able to outplay you. You retail retail activists, like they're gonna win. And what's funny is you saw a lot of the retail leave that. Some people did make some great money, but like a lot of people did leave that with a sense of defeatism. Yeah. There's kind of the happy we did it, proud we all did that, kind of almost like the Occupy Wall Street movement, like proud we did it, but like ultimately kind of defeated. What came out of Occupy Wall Street? Bitcoin. Now you have Bitcoin, which has a decade and a half narrative of like literally being like the disruptive tool. We see now that it aligns incentives between the big fish of Citadel and the BlackRocks with the retail, and the narratives are confluent. So like this would be that extra, this would be that dose of hopium that you could see, like again, reignite this. I mean, but at some point, don't we actually have to run real companies that aren't just shells for Bitcoin?
Not on a Bitcoin standard that runs on pixie dust and hopium. I do think that's the core question here, and that one that I've had with a lot of the companies that we've been covering. Like one recently that is going public on a small exchange in London or in the UK, right? They're announcing a Bitcoin treasury strategy. They plan to acquire more Bitcoin. This is the Smarter Web company. But something that CEO of that company said to me, I thought was really striking was, he said, we see this as an opportunity to augment our current business and have it be top of funnel to basically fund expansion of the core business. And this is a much smaller company. They're a web development company, right? Like they're going to be a sub $10 million market cap when they list. But his whole point was that Bitcoin is kind of like a steroid to help us build our core business. Maybe GameStop has that opportunity here. I think going back to some of our concerns that we discussed earlier, there's not room for them to grow unless they decide to break into virtual stores for gaming, right? Which are currently gatekept by the major platform developers, right? So like that's
a whole pivot, an entire pivot, and all your assets are physical stores. Physical.
Yeah, that's another risk for them too. I mean, if there's some analysts and investors are kind of saying, have been saying, and we've kind of seen the early warning signs of this, that the next real estate market will be actually like a commercial real estate crisis as office buildings stay empty and retail continues to suffer at the at the benefit of online shopping and things like that.
Yeah, that was the fear going into COVID, because it was that commercial real estate crisis, and it did play out a bit, but that was kind of the COVID meta narrative of everything crisis. But here we are, and it doesn't appear to be resolved. Some people are going back to work. The Amazon folks are going back to work. Some of the tech companies are going back to work, but forward-thinking companies like Blockspace don't really have. Probably, we're not gonna. We don't have a hub. We don't have a central base. And that is just the new normal for a lot of
especially information companies. But to put a cap on the whole attention economy, investor sphere, and the confluence of Wall Street and Main Street, I think that is kind of an interesting point to be made here, that if GameStop adopts this strategy, you will see traders on Wall Street that trade the volatility of a stock like this, like they've done with MicroStrategy, right? So these companies will actually end up buying some of the converts, right, and loaning them, or some of these investment firms will buy the converts, loan, MicroStrategy, or in this case, GameStop, the money, and then they will make a spread on the volatility either way, because they will simultaneously short the company and rebalance if it goes up. And so they can make money on the converts, which, kind of are treated as something of like a call option, right? And then they can also make money shorting it if things go south. But then you also have Main Street, the retail investors who are going to maybe buy into this as a proxy to Bitcoin, expecting kind of the supercharged returns that we saw with GameStop, which, to your point, some people made a lot of money, some people lost a lot of money. I think that generally speaking, we do kind of live in this vibes investing landscape where meme coins and all of these really hot, super speculative assets have made some people extremely wealthy overnight. And that's really attractive to people. And it's almost a better lottery in a way. I don't want to say it's a good lottery, but at least there's a chance to where you can actually make somewhat of a return if you're just quick on your feet. I'm not endorsing investing in any of this. This is not investing advice. But last point before we actually get into all of the short squeeze stuff that engendered all of this, even though we've kind of already touched on it already, trying to raise $1.3 billion in converts, but they don't even need those converts to purchase Bitcoin. They can purchase almost 3 times the amount that they are seeking from the converts just from the cash on their balance sheet alone. So as of February 1st, 2025, they have $4.756 billion worth of cash on their balance sheet. And going back to something we were saying earlier, the most not surprising, but the most interesting part about this is the vast majority of this cash came from at the market offerings and equity sales that they conducted during the meme stock craze. In 2021, they raised $1.672 billion from equity sales. I believe that was in the form of an at the market offering. Yes, that's what it says here on the filing. And last year they had $3.45 billion in ATM issuance, which is a crazy number. I mean, the fact that I find that really interesting. It's like at the heyday of the meme stock trading, they sold $1.7 billion worth of equity. Last year, they sold $3.45 billion. And that was in the aftermath after the stock had already cooled down. I think that's pretty interesting. But all that being said, what they were able to do with that is they strengthened their balance sheet by paying down all of their debt. They virtually have no debt now. And now they have a big cash position. So if you were going to give the bull case for GameStop, they actually have a really healthy balance sheet. Their core business is pretty weak right now. But if they go in and buy a bunch of Bitcoin, and if investors still take the bait, so to speak, and if people actually want to buy those converts, then there's no reason why we can't see this do well. Now, the only reason I think it wouldn't is that Bitcoin continues to either chop sideways or suffer this year. And if we go into a recession, then we probably should not see this do very well. But all that being said, that cash is a direct result of the short squeeze in 2021 that sent its stock price up to $1,000. I mean, what would you do if you were the CFO of that company? Your stock is trading at $1,000. You never thought that you would see half that, let alone maybe even a fourth of that. So you're going to sell shares as a result, and you're going to strengthen your balance sheet. Really smart move. But just going back to one of the things we said earlier, I think it's really interesting that like the fate of Bitcoin and GameStop are like intertwining themselves. I would rather say GameStop is more reliant on Bitcoin. But, the whole meme stock thing, which can only be seen in context, I think, with the whole 2021 market cycle with Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, gave it kind of a second wind. And now it might use that cash to buy Bitcoin.
Hi, this is Charlie, and we at Blockspace are putting on Op Next, a technical scaling conference for Bitcoin. It's coming up here very soon, April 11th and 12th at the Strategy, formerly Microstrategy HQ in Tysons, Virginia.
Join us on April 11th and 12th for talks and presentations from the likes of Jameson Lopp, Jeremy Rubin, James O'Byrne, John Attack, and many more on the most pressing questions for Bitcoin's future and technical development. Tickets go up in price on April 1st. We're going fast. Get them while they're cheap. And we hope to see y'all there in April.
Go to opnext.dev. That's opnext.dev to get tickets and learn more. It's not a crazy pivot. It's actually me as a vibes investor, it seems like a smart pivot. And if I, as a vibes investor, think that's a smart pivot, then there's probably a lot of other people. I think if I were to tease out one other dimension to this dynamic, a lot of the ethos, and this is a kind of a cultural insight that I kind of put forth. A lot of the rebellion, the activism of the Gamestop saga, as you said, it was from people who don't normally invest in stocks. And it was, the real zeitgeist was, against, like a critique of the unfairness of the markets and these wealthy institutional players. And a lot of that came from a very progressivist culture in the United States. Bitcoin has started to be adopted as a talking point of the right. I don't think it is. I think it's neutral, but I could see this being a wedge topic where you have within the GME zeitgeist crowd, you have folks who never would have liked Bitcoin anyway, even though on paper it does seem to check all the boxes of what they really believe in. That I would say that Occupy Wall Street movement, but who knows? Who knows how this is going to play out? We are trying to throw some stuff at the wall and imagine what the next year or so could look like.
If Bitcoin rips, the stock will rip.
If Bitcoin, yeah, it's simple math. That's very obvious. I think the uncertainty is where if Bitcoin does not rip quite so hard, what happens? Because as you know, when Bitcoin chops and is volatile, a lot of people get blown out. A lot of narratives die on the cutting floor there during the chop. And so if Bitcoin rips and GMEs manage to buy some, seems like I'd like the stock.
I do really wonder how much room is there for two of these companies, right?
Yeah.
Or 3 or 4 or 10 or 1,000, right? I mean, this is a common thesis with giga bullish Bitcoiners, right? The idea that eventually every company will hold Bitcoin on its balance sheet. Well, if that becomes the case, then the strategic advantage of actually doing so is probably evaporated at that point, right? And so maybe we can see the magic replicated again. We've obviously seen it replicated in some cases with MetaPlanet in Japan. They're also UTXO, the fund arm, hedge fund and VC arm of BTC Inc., which runs Bitcoin Magazine and the Bitcoin Conference. They recently purchased a company in Hong Kong that they've rebranded Moon Inc. A little on the nose, but we'll take it. And they're going to do the same thing in Hong Kong. And then, like I said earlier, the Smarter Web Company, which we covered today on Thursday at Blockspace, they're trying to replicate this in the UK. This being replicated in international markets actually makes sense to me to a point, because if you kind of have a few regional players or you have one MicroStrategy, so to speak, per country, you're going to have a larger investor pool, right? Like one of the things that Andrew Webley of the Smarter Web Company brought up is you're going to be able to have in the UK funds that have a UK only mandate to invest in the UK, and they will be able to actually purchase the stock. Whereas they can't do that with MicroStrategy. Also, it just lowers the barrier to entry for retail. You don't have to deal with Forex fees. You don't have to find an international broker, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, our friend Penny Ether has talked a lot about this, especially with regards to like Bitcoin miners when they account for a change in fair value of their assets. People assign these a much higher multiple than they're probably worth. And the way that he boils it down in kind of a basic sense, where it's like, would you actually pay more for Bitcoin over spot price? And if not, then why are you basically doing the same thing when you're assigning a premium to the stock price of some of these companies because they hold Bitcoin?
And I kind of wonder, like, what even is your thesis? Is your thesis that these companies will be reflexive, that they'll capture mind share? At some point, you do have to kind of look at, like, what is the real asset? What's the really value of the assets you own? And maybe measure it against the classic Bitcoin standard of why not just own Bitcoin itself. The huge irony, Colin, is that so much of the Bitcoin narrative of the past several years has been that Bitcoin will reorient all real businesses to actually have to be honest about making money. And yet empirically, we are seeing degeneracy spread to corporate speculation everywhere, even by many of the exact people who said that it would reorient all of our attention back to being productive IRL.
That's a really good point. The whole meme about under a Bitcoin standard, people will have to allocate capital more responsibly. It's like, will they, or will they just ape into Bitcoin and hoard it and then not do anything for their core business? I mean, not to kind of beat a dead horse or just kind of keep browbeating people with this, but that's one of the main criticisms of a lot of these companies is their core business models are dead or dying. And so Bitcoin is a way to stay relevant. To a certain extent, that's fine. But when you're investing in a company, you're investing in future cash flows. And if you don't have a core business, you don't have cash flows, then what are you becoming if not just like a massive, a massive Bitcoin stockpile, a massive wealth fund? Anyway, but enough about that.
A node in every closet, a BitAxe on every desk, and a MicroStrategy analog in every financial jurisdiction. What else are we going to discover? We need more MicroStrategies, we need more nodes, we need more BitAxes, and the world becomes a better place. It's as simple as that. This is what we've learned so far.
It's the trifecta.
The trifecta. On that note, thank you so much for listening to Bitcoin Season 2. Make sure to check out our newsletter and our website and all the other podcasts. We will see you on the...
Wait, Charlie, I just realized...
Are you seeing? I'm seeing this too.
GameStop just released how much Bitcoin they hold. This is incredible. They